everybody for coming out. My name is Robert. I'm the program lead for Cedar Commissions. I also book our Global Roots Festival here and manage our summer community-free programming.
I'm John Marks. I'm the operations director here, so kind of manage a lot of the public-facing functions of the Cedar, deal with finances and facilities and HR and stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All the stuff that makes it work that we don't really think about most of the time. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I guess that this workshop will probably be maybe about a half hour and then time for questions. So we'll have a couple of different section breaks. So try to hold on to your questions until then. If you absolutely need to ask it, just interrupt me. But yeah, this is designed to be it'll walk you through the application, a little bit about the Cedar, a little bit about what you would expect being in the program, and then give you some tips for ways to make your application strong. So. How many of you have been to the Cedar before this? Cool, awesome.
I've applied for this before, but I've never been.
Okay, nice. Well, welcome. So we'll do an introduction to who the Cedar is, overview of the Cedar Commissions, what artists do, what they receive, who's eligible, do some questions. We'll do an overview of the application and then final Q&A. So the mission of the Cedar Cultural Center is to promote intercultural appreciation and understanding through the presentation of global music and dance. We present a lot of different music here. Some of you may have been for our annual Drones Festival. Some of you may have been here for metal shows. Some of you may have been here for Domain J.D. Beck or jazz shows. It's just present a lot of different music in here. But that's our express mission. We have a couple things that we're committed to: artistic excellence and integrity, diversity of programming, community outreach, and then support for emerging artists. And that's really the spot that the Cedar Commissions comes in. And we're an all-ages nonprofit global music venue. Sometimes I think it's helpful for people who haven't been here before. It's just this is one of the few spots that people are able to bring their kids to a show. A lot of people that I know who are artists in the city are yeah, I went to my first show ever at the Cedar. Part of that is because it's an all-ages venue. We've been kicking it for 35 years. So this is our 35th year in session, I guess. Talk a little bit about the Cedar Commissions. So commissions 6 early career Minnesotan composers and musicians each year to create and perform new work on the Cedar stage. That's 30 minutes of music, a 40-minute set time overall. So there's 10 minutes for moving around on stage, banter, introductions, thank yous, all of that stuff. But expectation is half an hour's worth of music. Since the program's launched, there have been over 80 artists in a lot of different styles. Just double check this here. There's somebody at the door. Okay. Great, thank you. Yeah, a lot of different artists. Dua Saleh was one of the Cedar Commission's artists. Dessa as well, back in the day. Yeah, had quite a few artists that have just been on the cusp of their going up. And artists that are still on their way up. So. And it's made possible by a grant from the Jerome Foundation. So they fund a lot of work supporting creation of new music for artists in New York, 5 boroughs of New York, but then also Minnesota. Some cool connections there. The photos that you see are of this last year's Cedar Commission's performances. Mostly the performances. There's one in there at the end. Hey, Rosie. And then, so for Cedar Commission's artists, we talked about you'll create 30 minutes of new music sometime between August 2024 and then February 2025. The performances will happen on a Friday and a Saturday, 3 artists per night. And we define new music as music that has not been previously written, composed, recorded, or performed. So think of this as something that's brand new. Don't think of it as oh, I have these songs already and I want to put them into a thing. Think of it as I'm going to be writing new music throughout this process. Yeah, that's something in the past, sometimes artists have brought fully done songs already and they want it to be part of it. It's actually that's not really the aim of this grant in particular. It's like writing that music project. Yeah, and so you'll debut that new work in front of an audience in late February. Attend 6 cohort meetings, which are held each month at the Cedar. And then participate in a wrap-up meeting in March and complete an online evaluation. It's not too long, but that just helps us make the program better for the next cohort. You receive a $4,500 commission paid in September 2024, so we have all that money up front. You'll have a $350 production stipend. Think of that as like if you need to rent any additional equipment, if you need to hire a separate lighting tech, if you need to hire somebody who's like managing props, or somebody who's doing stage design or stuff like that, or paying out yourself, paying out artists that are involved in the performance too. That's paid out a little later on, like right after the performance, February 2025. Artistic mentorship, you'll have a $200 stipend to work with a mentor of your choice. And so sometimes people are like, oh, I'm already working with a composition mentor. Can I use that for working with them? It's like, for sure. Other times people are like, hey, who in your networks do you think would be a good fit? And then we're happy to reach out and see if those people are interested. Sarah Larson this last year asked if like Laserbeak might be interested in working with her. Some of you might know Laserbeak. Does a lot of the production for Doomtree and manages Radio Midnight. But yeah, Sarah was really interested in working with him. So then they worked and did mentor for this stuff. Tree, who's on stage, worked with a national touring artist, No Boy, who's based out of Portland. So Tree had 2 meetings with him. Yeah, so that's like the mentorship component. You can either come with somebody that you're really interested in working with, or you can be like, hey, who do you think might be a good fit to match up with the project that I'm working on? Yeah, there'll be cohort artistic support and relationship building. So the meetings are structured so that there's a lot of knowledge sharing between the artists. Artists will bring, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm really struggling with writing new music. What are some things that I could try to do? And so people are like, oh, just try to sit down for 5 minutes every morning and just like come up with something, don't judge it, just get it out and record it, listen back to it later, and just make sure that you're doing that every day. They'll bring different ideas. And so it's really, I don't know, each artist brings different strengths. Like there's some artists that were really well versed in touring. And so they brought information about like, yeah, this is how you can approach like booking gigs. Other artists were a lot more versed in like recording and distribution. And so they shared a lot more about like, yeah, these are the different providers that I've used. This is who I use currently, stuff like that. So really there's a lot of time facilitated for people to connect with each other. And administrative and marketing support from the Cedar staff. Last year we were going through a little bit more marketing transition, and so there wasn't as much support there. But basically what we plan to do is we'll work with you on developing a promotion plan for the show itself. Things that'll happen from when the artists are announced all the way through when tickets go on sale, all the way through like that final show. So yeah, and then there's support and mentoring on the Cedar administrative side, just in terms of like advancing the shows. There'll be some stuff, some like introduction to like booking shows, promoting shows, just some kind of basic industry knowledge as a foundation. But the content of that will be sourced from the artists themselves. It's like, what do you want to learn about? And then we'll assemble that and find stuff to talk about. Artist headshots, artist portraits, that's part of it too. And then, yeah, performances include a built-in tech rehearsal. Originally, that was something that was optional. An artist could use their production stipend if they felt like they needed it. But what we had noticed was that it's just like the ones that did the tech rehearsal were just like so much better. Like everything was locked down more. And so we just decided to use some of the budget like straight up for that. So that's guaranteed. Professional photos of the show itself, as you see, like these. Unmixed multi-track recording. So that's something where Chris, our lead audio engineer, he's usually the one that does it. He'll do a little bit of light mixing afterwards. You can work with him more if you want that more fully polished, or you can bring it somewhere else if you want to work those out on your own. And then single camera video documentation. So it'll be in probably be 2K from the back. just a big wide angle. And then let's see, who's eligible? So applicants from all musical genres and styles are eligible. We've had people who are noise artists, we've had people who are punk artists, we have people who've been more like ambient improvising, we've got Arabic jazz artists. It's like kind of pick a genre, and there's probably been a Cedar Commissions artist that's done that. We're committed to supporting a diverse cohort of artists that reflects who we are in the global music community, our community relationships. We encourage BIPOC folks and LGBTQ artists to apply. Yeah, it's definitely a mix of artists per year. You have to be an early career artist to be eligible. I would encourage you to read the definition that Jerome has online. It's still a little bit fuzzy, but it helps identify people who are like at the early stages of their career, people who haven't quite made it to like, oh yeah, I'm getting invited to all of these opportunities, like I've already won all of these different grants. If you're before that, but you are intending to make music, you are making music, you're actively creating music, you're playing gigs around town, that's what they would want to see versus somebody who is, it's like, oh, I just play music sometimes, you know. It's like you're looking for artists that are making that like their main thing. Even if you have a day job doing something else. And then you have to apply as a lead artist, not as a group to be eligible. So sometimes we'll have people apply, it's like, hey, my band, Controversial New Skinny Pill. Not actually, is applying. It has to be led by an individual. So you could definitely invite like your band members to be part of it, but the vision should be determined by a lead artist versus like, oh, we're gonna apply in on this thing. Artists can be part of multiple applications. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm applying with Ibrian. And so I can't apply as part of Ben's group. It's like you could be part of both as a support musician, which has happened in past years. Like I feel like, yeah, there's a handful of musicians that it's like, oh yeah, you're playing in both of their projects. You have to live in the state of Minnesota to be eligible, and then you also can't be a full-time degree-seeking student. You also can't have been a Cedar Commissions artist for like the last 2 rounds. I don't think we've had anybody be a repeat Cedar Commissions artist in my time here. So, what questions do you have currently?
Historically, have you had like the artists themselves try to get a certain number of people in the room, or what does it feel like in the room day of? For those shows? Yeah.
I'd say it's anywhere from like the shows that are kind of like the smallest have been like maybe around 125, which still feels like warm in the room. And like I think at biggest, that was like the year that Dua did it. It was like maybe 400. Which feels like quite cozy. So especially in like a seated environment. So, yeah, and that's part of why sometimes we go back and forth between like, should we have this across 3 nights or should we just keep it on 2? Especially with changeovers. It's part of why I've been so like emphatic that it's like 30 minutes of music, 40 minutes at length overall. You know, just because if the night goes on too long, you start to lose audience members. But if we split it off across 3 nights, then you're splitting the artist draw a little further than I think we want to. That's one of the things that I find really beautiful about Cedar Commissions is that like everybody pulls out their people. And you just see like this really big audience of like, oh wow, it's like members of the Hmong community are here, members of the Ethiopian community are here, members of the like Southside punk community are here, you know, and they're all mixing in the same room, which is really beautiful. And it's one of the fun things where it's like, my hope is that people will come for like one of the artists and leave being like, oh shit, all of those artists were awesome. I really want to follow all of them. So, yeah. This isn't awkward.
Yeah. I guess, you know, like, aside from understanding best way to present
Mm.
to you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that is
Yeah.
professional, actually have a friend that has a studio.
Mm.
We're better off going to a friend that has a studio and
Mm.
putting together a collage of 3 or 4 songs. Or
Mm.
What's most interesting as far as trying to showcase what you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say that the panelists are prepped to really accept and take in a wide variety of samples. So we're not necessarily looking at somebody who's got the most pristine quality. Not everybody has access to a studio. And so it's maybe it's somebody who's sending us an iPhone recording of a composition that they made. And so we asked the panelists to really look okay, what's the base idea underneath here? What is this person showing us that they're doing in this recording? And how do we see that connect to the project that they're proposing? Your work samples shouldn't be a prototype of what you plan to do, although they could be, a little bit. But the idea is that you're writing music new for Cedar Commissions. The thing that they should show is they should show your abilities that you're planning to use as part of the project, right? So if you're planning to play guitar in the project, it's you would want a sample of you playing guitar versus something of you just singing. If you are, if you're planning to be the producer, the main producer for the project itself, you would want to share one of the tracks, a track that you've produced. Basically it's we ask the panelists to take the samples and ask, based on these samples, do I think that this person could execute this project? Are they demonstrating their facility as an artist? I guess my question back to you then is what are the things about you as an artist that are most compelling, that you would want to highlight in a performance, that you would want to highlight in a show, and try to share samples that amplify that. I think if there's something, you'll pick 2 samples, and so it's 5 minutes total. You can split those however you want. Maybe you have 1 minute of one song and 4 minutes of a different one. But picking things that are a little bit contrasting, highlight different qualities about you as an artist. That way you can show a bit of breadth. That's what I'd recommend. So we'll talk more in depth about things that go into solid application. In terms of applying, submit the following by Monday, July 1st at midnight via Google form. So 2 pages or 3 minutes of video describing your project. I would say projects have been funded that do either. If you're somebody who really would prefer to talk and share that out, make your outline, send us your outline. But record that video, that 3-minute video. Other people are a lot better in the written form. And so you can do either of those. There's not one that's going to be weighted higher than another. Just think about the way that you can most effectively communicate your project idea. So things we ask, what is your project idea? How feasible is your project? And how will this project further your career as an emerging artist? And so for the questions that are on the application, those are literally the questions that are on the rubric. So when we give that to the panelists, it's those 3 questions. It's 1 to 5. How well did somebody answer that? When I've been applying for grants, some of the advice that people have given me is when you're first getting started writing, make bullet points and just answer it the simplest way possible, just to make sure that you've covered those areas as a base. And then you can fill it out from there. But sometimes it's if you try to just write through it and you don't highlight these things first, they can get lost in there. I think in terms of project ideas, the ones that resonate the most are ones where the artist has a really strong connection to the subject material, really strong connection to the project idea. For example, one artist a couple years ago, he's an electronic music producer. His family immigrated here from Iran. And so he wrote a project on like the oil industry in Iran and the way that that has affected people's immigration, the way that has affected politics in the country. And he was a political science major, and so it's like he brought in that knowledge from earlier into that. Other people have done different like family research projects. So Alain Blanc, who was part of that estuary show, his project was digging into the immigration stories of his grandparents, immigrating from like Eastern Europe to Mexico. And so, thinking the things that we want to see are like, why is this project important to you? Like, why does it make sense for you as an individual? Why is this important to like a larger community beyond that? And that could be locally here in the Twin Cities. It could be within a specific group. Like, it's like, this is really important for the punk community, and this is why. Or it could be on like a larger level. You think about it societally, and just the way that it's interacting with things that are going on a more macro scale. But those are the things that I think rise to the top when people are able to articulate why this is important overall, and then why this is important to them. That's a good base.
I would just add, think about the ways in which this third point here, how will this project further your career? How will it be transformative for you as an artist? So it might be that you've been writing music and performing music on your own for some time, and this project will help you expand that into a larger ensemble format, for instance, to form a band or an ensemble to perform that music. Or it can be that you've established a musical practice that you would like to expand upon. You're going to use this opportunity to write music that goes beyond what has been in your kind of wheelhouse or within your practice up to now. So think about the ways in which this project, this commission can be transformative.
Yeah. I've seen some of that happen this last year too. There's one of the artists, Sarah Larson, who, like, this was the main, like, she's been making music with a lot of different people in a lot of different groups for a long time, but this was like her first major like solo body of work. And so she worked on recording an album during the same time that she was doing a Cedar Commissions, and released it maybe like the month after Cedar Commissions, and then has been like touring that project the last couple months. So it was like a really good like springboard.
And RZ, for instance, who was on the screen earlier, he had, from my understanding, he had been producing music on his own, in the box, kind of as an electronic music and hip hop producer, and expanded that to include live instrumentation.
Mm-hmm. You covered the stuff on the left side. That's the stuff that John and I were talking about just here now. As a note, if you write us a project that says, I'm going to use this to record an album, it's kind of like automatically flagged as like, this is the commission funds. You might be like, oh, but like, isn't that what this is about? It's like, sort of. It's about gearing things towards the live performance and like putting that effort, putting that focus towards how can this live performance, this live debut, sharing with the audience be like the best that it can be, versus like, I'm going to use like 4,000 of this to like record the album. And certainly like recording, audio production, like small gear purchases, those can be part of the budget. But if you wrote us this grant and you said like, I'm mainly going to use this money to buy myself like, I don't know, like a Prophet synth. It's like, it would be like, that's really nice, but that's also like, I don't know. It's like, if that's the majority of your budget and it doesn't quite, I don't know. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it shouldn't be predominantly gear purchases. You should think about the live show itself. Whether that's working with a projectionist, whether that's working with Some people have worked with dancers, and some people have not worked with either of those, but they have been really focused on, this is the way that the music is going to transition. These are the people who are going to be involved, really focusing in on that live set. Yeah. You'll be evaluated on how feasible your project is. We want to see a rough timeline. You can put it into months if you want to. That's helpful. It's like, in September, I'm planning to do this. In October, like in September, I'm planning to generate a lot of ideas and just like record every day. In October, I'm planning to go through those ideas while still generating some new ideas, but then start to sift through, form this project, select different songs. In November, I'm planning to dig into those ideas deeper, write out different parts, start working with collaborators. Like December, really going to start rehearsing more. January is going to be like focused on rehearsals. February is the show. We want to see some sort of rough timeline like that. Yeah, and then budget, just the way that you're going to break out that $4,500 and the $350 production stipend. Yeah. And like I said before, it's like you'll be performing with 2 other artists on that night. And so the set length needs to be no more than 40 minutes. And it has to be stageable within the Cedar space. There are certain things that are possible here. Like we had an aerialist last year, which was quite fun.
That looked pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome. But then there are also some things that just kind of aren't possible. So thinking about what's possible within this space. I'm trying to think of something that would just be totally wildly.
Well, it's important to consider that your performance will be on the same thing as 2 other performances. So I think that's any set, set design.
No pyrotechnics.
No pyrotechnics.
You need to be able, and you would need to help provide the crew to make that happen.
Yeah, or if you were wanting to build a swimming pool on the center of the floor, it's
But if you have an aerialist, you should bring that because
That was pretty cool.
You can vouch.
yeah, we can do that.
that's possible.
Would do it. Yeah, this is just a sample budget. I'll share this slideshow with you all afterwards, so obvious. But yeah, costs paying collaborators for their time and input according to how much they contribute to the project. There's somebody who is playing out the parts that you wrote. Maybe you wouldn't pay them as much as somebody who is co-creating, somebody who's writing a saxophone line for you. Thinking about the work that goes in there. Rehearsal space, paying yourself for your research and rehearsal time. Small tech purchases, things like composition lessons or performance lessons. I would say sometimes people will write a proposal that's I'm going to learn how to play the guitar during 6 months. And we're that's kind of a lot, so it's not primarily geared towards developing a new skill. It's more honing a skill that you have, I would say. And then sometimes people have used their costs to cover a small retreat. There's an artist, Sophia Deutsch, who had this really beautiful cello quartet plus auxiliary percussionist. And she spent some time out in nature, and she didn't write music that sounded like nature, but she wrote music that felt like you were in nature. That's what she geared it towards. So she spent I think she spent a couple of days up north in Minnesota, so she used some of the funds for that. Yeah, and then how will this project further your career as an emerging artist? John was talking about that. I was talking about that with, in terms of Sarah Larson as an example. Yeah, thinking about the impact this can have. And yeah, when we're thinking about what it means for a project to push or stretch you, these are a lot of different examples. I was talking about Sophia Deutsch. Lady Chuck was an artist who performed this last year. She explored a lot of different indigenous instruments from Central and South America, putting those together with some more modern textures, like blues guitar, feedback, and then also synthesizers. It was really cool. So that's a way that she was pushing herself. Sometimes it can be like working with collaborators. Joe Kellen was one a couple of years ago where they worked with a projectionist who was like manipulating the video live, but then they also had somebody who was video cameraing live. And then they also had a puppeteer, and then they also had the band. So it's like, that's an example of working with collaborators. Yeah, and then some of the people who've been like diving deeply into research themes or like personal stories. RZ that was mentioned earlier did some reflection on like pandemic and the uprisings that happened in May and June of that year, and then reflecting on that and then writing music based on that experience. Cat Parent had this really awesome one where they told this story of this swampland creature that was formed from this researcher who was investigating like an oil company and then like fell prey to the bog. And they wrote this like narrative of like them uncovering what was going on in this oil company, and it was like it created this whole character. It was really cool. Yeah, and I'd say most people's projects are going to be a combination of those things. We just really want to know where this is going to push you to as an artist, where you're aiming to go with this. Also submit 1 page or 1.5 minute video describing your artistry. It can be formatted as a resume, or you can do it more in narrative form, where it's like, when I was 5, I started piano lessons. I was taking piano lessons until I was 25. Along the way, it's like, I've learned Arabic percussion, I've learned drum set, I was participating in a drum line. These are the way that those things inform my work now. I think that's something that's really helpful. It's not always helpful to list like absolutely everything that you've done. It's like, kind of think about highlighting the important things and the ways that those feed into your practice now. Yeah. And then 2 audio or video work samples. So together, those should total no more than 5 minutes. You can split those however you want. 30 seconds, 4.5 minutes, 2.5, 2.5, something like that. We do ask that you cut them to the appropriate length. In the past, we've asked people for timestamps. It's like, oh, you can share with us like this YouTube video that you did. But it ends up getting a little bit, I don't know, a little bit cumbersome. And then sometimes people end up listening to more of a sample than they should have. So in the effort of like making it really fair, it's just like, we just ask that you do that work of chopping it down, uploading it to Google Drive, and then panelists can listen to it from there. Yep. Yeah, this is all stuff that we've talked about. Yeah, and I do want to emphasize it's not required to be like a demo of the project idea. So don't think of it as like needing to function there. Just think of it as needing to demonstrate the skills that you, as the lead artist, would need to use to do the project that you're proposing. And then artists are chosen. There's a review panel of local musicians, former Cedar Commissions artists, community members, and then also staff members. Every app is reviewed on 4 criteria: the project idea, feasibility of it, who this artist is as an emerging artist, and then the work samples. I didn't include all of the questions up here because all of the questions are on the call for artists. Those are the questions that we use as a rubric. So yeah, if you like answer those, it's like, that's what you'd be graded on. And we do review every application. So just know that. It's not like, oh, we're just not even gonna look at that one. Every application is reviewed with a lot of focus and thoroughness. Cohort members, they'll be publicly announced on August 20th, and then those who are selected will be notified if they receive a commission no later than August 15th. Usually I will notify everybody, but I do include this language just in case we only notify the commission's winners. Usually I will let people know if they haven't received it. Yeah, so question time. Talked about a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So if like my project would have an emphasis in like a visual art or mask making or something, like how much I know there's like only 2 pages or however to explain your project. How much is like, how much would you focus on that versus like the emphasis on the music? Like how have people like split that up in the past? If the visual aspect is an important part of the project.
Sure. It'll be subjective, but maybe if you thought about it in thirds, like a third of it as like visual, a third of it as music, and then a third of it as like your budget and how you're going to execute it.
I would say that the panelists will view it holistically. They'd be interested in the ways in which the visual components contribute to the musical experience, right?
I have 2 questions. Will we have access to this specific PowerPoint that we saw today? Okay, excellent. Second question, can I have whatever that is?
Oh, yeah.
I have another question too, but let me come back to me. I'll ask it in a second.
I'm going to piggyback on the visual aspect. For me as an artist, the visual aspect, it's been relatively non-existent, but I'm really interested in that part of it. Is that something that you see that might have some support for, or should I seek that elsewhere prior?
I'd say, like, if it's something that you're interested in being a part of it, we can certainly connect you with people who are like lighting designers, but if it's more in the artistic realm, I would encourage you to like connect with somebody about doing projections or like animations. Connect with them ahead of time. I would see us more as like facilitating that creative thing happening, and not necessarily being the ones who are like, oh yeah,
Creation
like,
side of it.
yeah.
So, I know you said something about emerging artists need to be already performing and making music and stuff like that. If I was a performer in terms of the dance realm, but not in the music realm, even though I've delved into music quite a bit in the past like 10, 15 years, I'm transitioning from one field to the other. Would that still count?
So you might consider yourself an established dance artist, correct? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that that's absolutely.
Yeah, I just got injured and I can't do that anymore, so now I'm
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to move things into another realm.
100%.
I've got work samples for all of that. That's not a problem there.
Yeah, I think that definitely qualify. Any questions about eligibility? Since this is funded by the Jerome Foundation, they are very explicit on their website. They have this linked on the application form. But
I'll check that out.
yeah. And if you do have nuanced questions around eligibility, I'm sure that we can help you answer that. If we don't have the specific answer to the question, we would be able to find out the answer to that question through the Jerome Foundation. We would relay that. We would help facilitate that conversation.
And is it just music, or could it be something involving dance?
It can be involving dance. Music should be like the backbone of the project. So if somebody proposed like, oh, we're going to choreograph this work, and then we're also going to have a sound designer, it's like, that's not the focus for like this.
No, I'm more interested in the fact that I consider a lot of times like stuff I've done, I consider like it's percussive, like clogging and tap and stuff like that. I consider that just as much part of the music sometimes as the other instruments are.
Totally.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking.
So,
Maybe I can't, but okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For the meetings, are the personal check-ins? Is it
Mm.
like a thing of trying stuff out? Like, I'm curious to know what happens in those
Yeah.
6 meetings.
It is. It's a bit of both,
Okay.
or a bit of all of that. It's definitely a focus on building connections with the other artists that are involved. I think we might have talked about this a little bit right before you came in. It was like right before you came in. But like knowledge sourcing from the other artists that are there too. So it's like if somebody has a lot of knowledge in one area, artists can pose like troubleshooting questions. It's like what are you guys using for like helping your other musicians learn the music? Like I'm having a really hard time communicating that. It's like, oh, I've just been using like voice notes and I'll just like record and then send that off, like whatever I have every week, you know, stuff like that. There is one big meeting where it's a show and tell, just in terms of like sharing a little bit of a snippet of what you're working on. I think we're going to integrate more of that happening this coming year. So we might have 2 sessions that are like that, or some sort of sharing, just like a snippet of what you're working on with the rest of the cohort, just like a small recording, something like that on a regular basis. There are certain artists that really don't like doing that, but I think it's helpful for just being able to like work on it in smaller increments. So I would encourage people who like really don't want to share something until it's fully done. It's like this is a chance to like work on stretching that a little bit.
I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but the Cedar, the cohort kind of agrees to, or comes to consensus about a feedback protocol for
Mhm.
that works in progress share out. So, kind of determining the kinds of feedback that you're looking for. If you want that to be something that is purely subjective, how did this make you feel? Or is it totally objective? Like, how is this working, like, sonically and visually for you? Like, what stood out to you? What did you see? What did you hear? It can be, you will determine what that feedback protocol is in collaboration with Robert and the Cedar as well. So.
And there will be some sort of component of like individual check-ins, less about like, oh, I'm checking to make sure that you made progress, but it's more of just like, hey, how's it going? Talk for like 15, 20 minutes every other week, and just be like, is there anything that you need? Like this last year, there were certain artists where we would have a check-in, and they were like, yeah, I'm thinking about like just not having keys as part of my project because I know like the person that I asked is busy. I was like, well, we know how like keys players, it's just like you can still have that as part of your project. So like that's something we can help you out with. So it's like troubleshoot some of the stuff like that versus like, I don't know, versus like forcing you to be on track,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, think of it more as support versus like accountability, I guess.
I kind of want to see, like, I'm a person that definitely learns from examples. I know you played something earlier, I don't know what that was, but is there a way to, like, see past performers post their show? Okay, excellent.
Yeah. So it's all up on our YouTube channel.
Thank you, YouTube.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like everything except for 2020. And over the next couple weeks, we're going to be sharing just individual videos of individual songs for the artists that performed this last year.
Okay.
So that'll give you a good idea.
We'll turn the anxiety down, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
But there are like full performances on YouTube,
Yeah.
just to give you a sense of how it flows.